It's the Boris Dirk podcast. We're back after a week-long hiatus because I had my ACL surgery on Monday. Everything seems to be going well, or at least according to plan. Uh, ACL graft is holding. All the incisions are looking good, but no doubt has been a bear of a week. So, uh, yeah, happy to be able to record now about a week out. Things have been going a little slower than I would have hoped. Still some difficulty with sleeping and things like that, but at least the pain is starting to subside and the knee's starting to, start to resemble a normal knee again. So hopefully I'll be on the rapid road to recovery in no time. Samler, how you doing?
Good. My brain is still injured, but that's not going to heal. And Damian Lillard requested a trade yesterday. It's a very heavy day in the Semler household and across the country for Blazers fans. Feels like the culmination of a lot of mismanagement. Feels like it happened in slow motion, whether it's paying Anthony instead of Josh Hart, trading for CJ the way we did, and really getting fucked on those picks, trading Covington and Norman Powell for seemingly nothing. Keon Johnson, prospect of the year. I don't even know if he's
Yeah.
going to be on our team this year. And it's sad. And the ironic, harsh part of this is that the Blazers could be in really good shape in a couple months. Like they could have one of the more exciting young cores, and they're more likely to win a title in the next 7 years or decade than they were 2 days ago. And that's what I hate about the NBA. Dame Lillard is the best player in Blazers history. Bill Walton had the highest peak of any Blazer ever, but he really only had a season and a half of Blazer greatness. And
Yeah.
so Blazers fans have 100% agreed at this point. Dame is our GOAT forever. Maybe he'll come back when he's 38, washed up, and play six man in the playoffs. We don't know. But all I'm going to say is I want him to go somewhere they can win. I do not want him to go to Miami. It makes no fucking sense. I don't want first round picks that will activate when I'm in my 30s. And there are a lot of places we could send Dame where he would be on a really good team. Miami makes no sense. And I love him, but he can't do this to our family. And yeah, there's nothing more to add. I mean, I feel like it was a pretty before we get to our thoughts on the draft from what was it, a week or two ago, 10 days ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't that eventful of a free agency. A little bit disappointing. I mean, Van Fleet to Houston is big, but they are not going to be good for a few years. The Dame trade, I guess, if you consider that part of free agency, but Dame was just waiting until the end of the weekend to see Joe Cronin. Are you capable of anything? Like,
Yep.
can anything happen? And I'm not mad at Dame at all. It's 100% on the organization. They disrespected him by saying, wait and see. We're going to be bad. He'll get us a really good pick. That's a great asset. Maybe we'll turn that into a player who helps us win now. Oh, no. We got Scoot at number 3. Scoot never goes third. In most drafts, Scoot's, 1 or 2. So we got to keep Scoot, Dame. He's better than the guy we're going to get. And Dame has a right to be like, fuck you. We didn't surprise get Scoot. We got Scoot because we sucked and you played Cam Reddish and Kevin Knox. And here's another thing. I love Trendon Watford. Trendon Watford's 22. He didn't need to go. If we're rebuilding, keep Trendon Watford. That was the cherry on top, but whatever. Trendon Watford is not a big deal. Our GOAT is a big deal. And this was years in the making. Joe Cronin is in over his head, and I am sad. And you know what? Shaedon, Scoot, and whatever we get for Dame is going to put us in a pretty good spot, but we're years away. And being years away sucks. And the Miami Heat are grown-ass men, and they're never years away. You think they're in no man's land, and they reemerge, zombie Heat, blah, blah, blah. And I wish that I rooted for a team like that. Tanking is a thing of the past. It's a different league today, and I'm fucking done with Joe Cronin. I don't even know who our owner is at this point. And Blazers fans everywhere are just praying that Phil Knight gives the Allen family an offer they can't refuse, because Uncle
Yep.
Phil is the only one who could save us. He's the only rich enough man in Oregon. And that is that. Let's talk about the draft before I tear up again.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we had an activity planned because we wanted to add some spice to our post-draft recap. Obviously, we brought you a few hours of draft content, and we aren't ready to let go of this draft conversation just yet. Now we know when guys were picked and where they're going. And so we're going to do this weird draft where we're basically just drafting stock in each pick. So for instance, I loved Kobe Buffkin. I had him at number 6. He fell a little bit, fell down to 15 in Atlanta, where, I don't like any guards prospects if they're playing their early career with Trae Young. So I'm obviously worried about it. I love being able to get Kobe at 15, but the fit in Atlanta, I don't know. I don't think any guard has really thrived next to Trae Young to this point in his career. So Kobe might be a little bit lower on my board than he was on my big board when he existed in a vacuum. So yeah, maybe it doesn't quite make sense to our listeners yet, but we're just going to start going. We're going to start drafting fits, and hopefully it'll make sense.
Yes. The guys who we just think they're really going to pop where they landed. And when we look back in a few years on this draft, they're going to end up being redrafted a lot higher than they were on draft night. So yes, without further ado, do you want to hit the first pick?
No, you have to.
All right. First pick. And I'm still not totally sure I understand what the rules of our draft are.
Yeah, Max tried to create a complicated algorithm that would have made this even more of a nightmare for the audience. So we're just going to do it by feel. So
yeah. So if we're going feel, it's got to be going with the heart. And I'm going to take Sidi Sissoko with the first pick. The Spurs drafted him at 42, I believe. And I had him ranked in my top 12, top 11 on my board. I think he's going to be, the Spurs are the perfect place for him. He gets to play with his French countryman, Victor Wembanyama. And I could very easily in a few years see him being in the lottery in a redraft or in the top 10. And he's going to get a chance to learn from Boris Diaw. He's going to sort of fit within that Spurs ecosystem of ball movement and skill development. Really his only thing that sort of is a swing skill for him is the shooting, but I kind of like the way it looks. People were debating between him and his G League teammate Leonard Miller for shooting, and I just can't fathom having more faith in Leonard Miller's jump shot than in Sidi Sissoko's, just based on the way they look. And I think that's going to be a really fun team with him and Sohan. Those are kind of two real Swiss Army knife type forwards, and then whatever Wembanyama turns into, whether it's an all-time great or just a great or someone who can't stay healthy. It's going to be a great, fun team to watch. So Sidi, I think, is going to be the biggest riser from this class when we look back in a few years, and that's why I'm taking him 1.
All right. Give me Scoot at number 3. This isn't because my team got him. I had him number 1 on my board. And I think he's a high level, number 1 pick. In most drafts, I think teams would be really happy. When the Bulls got Derrick Rose, they were really happy. Pray for Scoot's lower body because he rises and falls with a lot of force. But I'm with all of the heartache this week for Blazers fans, I'm super happy about our point guard of the future.
Yeah, and Scoot is someone who I think when we see these really athletic point guards come into the league, whether it's Russ or John Morant or Jaden Ivey or Derrick Rose, I think his skill level is very far ahead of where all those guys were as prospects when they came into the league in terms of passing and shooting. Maybe not passing, but certainly shooting. And while he might not have that A++ level of athleticism that Westbrook and Ja has, he's still an A or an A+ for sure. And I think the combination of that with the skill and his work ethic, and he's already got a great NBA body, I think, I would still probably pick Victor to be the number 1, but he was my clear number 2, and I think would be number 1 in almost every draft going back the last 5 years.
He has an NBA ready body and an NBA ready personality. He's been a professional for a couple of years. He turned 19 in February. And if you listen to this guy talk in these early Blazers press conferences, he's just a natural. And either he's really good at presenting or he's an incredibly precocious young man who has a bright future as a leader in the league. I'm really excited about the energy that he gives off. When I see him in front of a microphone, it reminds me of Anthony Edwards and the electricity he brought to his pre-draft process. So yeah, I got him. Scoot's my guy.
Yep. All right. My next pick, I'm going to take the Lakers taking Jalen Hood-Schifino at number 17. Mm-hmm. I had him at number 9 on my board, and I think this is just a dream fit for him to be a secondary ball handler off the bench in the first stages of his career. They've got so many. I mean, side note, what the Lakers have done in this free agency period, getting Gabe Vincent, bringing back Austin Reeves on a good deal, D'Angelo Russell on a decent deal, at least that's a short term. Sure, they overpaid Rui, although the details of that are still yet to fully emerge. But I think Hood Schifino getting the chance to learn from LeBron, getting the chance to kind of play off of all these other ball handlers on the team, whether it's Reeves, Russell, LeBron, Vincent, he's just going to have a chance to really hone his pick and roll ability. As long as he can improve his spot up shooting, I think he's going to stick in the league for a really long time because he's big for his position. He's like 6'5", 6'6". He's got a good wingspan. He's a decent athlete, though I'd like to see him have a little bit more sort of pop at the rim, but just in terms of his size and mobility for his position is in sort of a high notch.
Yeah.
And his pick and roll decision making, I thought, was really good at Indiana in an offense that had a lot of sort of clogged spacing. And I think he's really going to flash real upside with the Lakers. And he's not going to be asked to do too much early in his career, really just defend, hit spot up shots and, run some pick and rolls off the bench. Hopefully, I mean, the only impediment to him might be that Lakers team is deep and he might not get as much sort of game reps as he may like early on in his career. But I just think that's a great environment for him. And the Lakers kind of, they've had a very good eye for talent over the last few years. Whenever they take young guys, whether in the draft or undrafted, they tend to pan out pretty well, whether it's Reeves, Caruso, going back a little bit more to one draft, they got Lonzo, Kuzma, and Josh Hart all at the same time. Their scouting department's been pretty good at picking out these guys. So I'm encouraged that Jalen was one of my favorite guys in the draft and they liked him too. And there's another guy who I'll probably take later who was another one of my favorites in the draft that they also took. So
don't get your hopes up for them as Lakers because they will be packaged for like Steph Curry or a disgruntled clutch client, overpaid clutch client in the next couple of years. And the Lakers had a good draft. I mean, yeah, Max Lewis at 40. I wasn't a Max Lewis fan, but I had him better than 40. And Colin Castleton was a guy who I had on my board from Florida. I think he's a really toolsy, versatile big man. Like I heard someone call him ground bound Anthony Davis, which I think that's a little bit too much of a compliment, but he does a lot and he's really good with the ball in his hands. And I think that he'll fit in well there. So if they don't trade all three of these guys for a clutch client, good times ahead for the Lakers. Hood Schifino's a guy I've watched even more since the draft, and I've liked him more and more and sort of like seeing more of the things that you loved. I think he's like really like a brilliant pocket passer, pick and roll maestro. I still have doubts about his spot up 3-point shooting and his finishing, but he brings so much and he's young. And I want to have a guy like who's that competitive, who showed up like that in big college games in the Big Ten. I think he has the it factor. So good pick on your end.
For sure.
I'm going to take Jaime Jaquez at 18, which is funny because that's where this draft starts to become its own draft. I had Jaime at like 21. So in my head, I'm not sure I would have taken him at 18 in a vacuum, but in Miami, I just know that this guy, if they don't trade him, because God forbid he's involved in a Dame trade, he is not the blue chip trade piece that I want in Portland, but he's going to be so good if Miami keeps him. He has all the Miami qualities. I'm just regurgitating things that people have already heard about that pick, but I believe them wholeheartedly. He actually has similar dimensions to pre-draft Jimmy Butler. He's not nearly the athlete, but he's way more skilled than Jimmy was when he entered the NBA. So I think Jaime is one of these like Desmond Bainey upperclassmen who might have more upside in this specific fit, might have more upside as an NBA player than I had been able to comprehend pre-draft.
Yeah. And, they'll train him up to shoot better on spot ups, but he'll help them from a rebounding perspective if they don't trade him, because he's a great rebounder for his size. He's a really creative scorer from the mid range and sort of from the post. And, people have concerns about sort of what position he's going to guard in the NBA. I just think he's so smart that I think he's going to be able to guard wings decently. He'll be able to use angles to guard fours. I love that pick as well. It was funny because I thought it was great value, but I also had him at 18 on my board. So they picked him exactly where I had him. It was just he's absolutely perfect for Miami, and his mentality is gonna translate so well there. So yeah, I absolutely see that one. My next pick, screw it. I'm gonna go ahead and take Maxwell Lewis. I had him at 40 on my or at 15 on my board. The Lakers took him at 40. We just talked about sort of how much I like the Lakers offseason, but he's someone who sets them up well, I think, for if he hits for the post LeBron era, where he's a real upside swing. He's a big wing, 6'7", one of the prettiest shots in the draft, I'd say. And I think he's going to be able to shoot at a high level. Guys who are 6'7" and can shoot tend to do pretty well in the league. And then he's also got flashes of ball handling. There are some approach things you worry about a little bit in terms of turnovers. He's not always the sort of highest IQ player, doesn't flash a lot of fancy passing, but I think the combination of his tools, his shooting, and his ball handling make him I thought for sure a first round prospect, borderline lottery for me. And the fact they got him at 40, I think, is an absolute steal. He's probably not someone who's going to play very much in his first year or two. He's going to see a lot of time with the South Bay Lakers, but I think going forward in a few years, we'll look back and he's going to be a big riser from 40.
All right. Big week for the Lakers. Let's just say Wembanyama's off the table because I guess he should have been named now. I mean, we have this fucking amorphous draft format we're doing right now. Let's say Victor is not on the board because even as someone who had Scoot number 1, I do think Victor has the highest ceiling in this draft. And obviously, it was a great pick for the Spurs. So yeah, don't worry about picking him. I'm going to go with my guy, Olivier Maxence Prosper, who was picked 24th by the Kings and sent to Dallas. And Dorian Finney-Smith is a very possible outcome. Like sort of a Dorian Finney-Smith profile he's one of the guys I would think of if things go right for Prosper in the NBA. And I just think he's an amazing fit. I think he's a good enough catch and shoot 3-point shooter who's only going to get better because his 3-point profile gets easier and easier now that he's playing with Luka. We saw the way that Dorian thrived in Dallas. And Olivier is that type of player, 3 and D, but like real D. He can guard guys smaller than him. I think that he's strong enough to guard guys his weight or a little bit bigger. And he's exactly the type of versatile defensive weapon that you need next to Kyrie and Luka, who will be carrying such a massive offensive load.
Yeah, he'll be someone who can comfortably guard 1 to 4 in the NBA. And all you have to do is watch his tape from playing UConn and how he chased Jordan Hawkins around and prevented him really almost from like taking any shots in the game they played each other. I would be surprised if Hawkins got off more than 3 or 4 shots when Omax was the primary defender on him. He reminded me a lot of like how Jared Vanderbilt chased around Steph Curry in the second round between the Warriors and the Lakers. And Omax in general reminds me a lot of Vanderbilt, but with more shooting upside. So if you have someone like that, who's a real top-notch defender, can guard 1 to 4, is switchable, and can also hit threes at a decent clip, that's an extremely valuable player. So yeah, I can also see him being a big riser and contributing to the Mavs next year already.
And if you're trying to talk yourself into Omax having even more offensive upside, he's a really good athlete. He's a powerful finisher. Like he had really good finishing numbers at the rim. He might have even more slashing juice than he showed at Marquette, where he had a very specific role. And he also was like just the defensive captain for a really good Shaka Smart defense. Olivier is my guy. Who you got?
I'll go ahead and take Cam Whitmore. That was one of the bigger stories of the draft, was him sliding from the top 6 all the way to 20. It was rumored that Houston was deciding between Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore at number 4. Ended up taking Amen, which I think was a good pick, and then still ended up getting Whitmore down at 20. So I think he's just got, insane upside. You were higher on him than I was, but even at 20, I think that's a crazy slide for him to have. He must have had like the worst interviews of all time or just some crazy medical issue, because that's an even bigger slide than Michael Porter had. And everyone kind of views Michael Porter as having some of the worst medicals of any draft prospect they've ever seen entering the league. So his athleticism is insane, even though I think it's a little bit more kind of, you can see it in a gym more than kind of live functionally. But when he gets a chance to load up and sort of power up, he's an absolutely ferocious finisher, and he's got shooting upside. I think he's going to be a good defender. He's got some sort of, depending on which way his game goes, either some OG to him or some Miles Bridges to him. But I just think the upside there, he's a top 5 talent, and the fact they got him at 20 is pretty nuts.
Yeah. I talked shit about Sam Vecini recently on this podcast just because I was a little juiced. But Sam Vecini, who is the best and usually is pretty plugged into these things, said that Cam Whitmore, it wasn't only the medicals, which were red flags for a lot of teams, but also he was not a great interview guy. I think he's an introvert and he probably wasn't so comfortable in that setting. And so everything except the like jumping out of the gym part of the pre-draft process was an L for Cam Whitmore. But Adam Spinella, who's also one of the best people in this draft community, said that when he coached against Cam Whitmore in Pennsylvania, that he has a very vivid memory of Cam Whitmore's teammates like leaving a bunch of trash on the bleachers in Spinella's gym, and Cam saying like, guys, turn around, we got to clean that shit up. Like, this is no way to treat someone else's gym. And Spinella, who like doesn't, he's never just spitting hot air. Like, I really trust his word, said this is like a mature, nice man that I've spent enough time with to really respect. And so maybe he's not the type of nice guy that succeeds in the NBA, but Spinella wanted his audience to know that Cam Whitmore is not a bad character guy, basically. And so if his knees hold up, because he did have some lower body troubles in high school, he still has a chance to be a really, really good player. And at number 20, if the medical red flags come to fruition and he doesn't have a great NBA career, it was still an amazing swing because the Rockets considered him at 4. All right. My next pick, give me Kobe Brown, LA Clippers,
Yep.
number 30. I don't know what type of Clippers team he's going to be playing for. I mean, most free agency is over today, Sunday, July 2nd. So it looks like he's running it back one more time with Paul George and Kawhi. Russ, 2 years, $8 million. It looks like Kobe can be a Swiss Army knife on a team that will be competitive if its stars play, even though they probably won't. And I just love Kobe Brown because I think he's extremely valuable to a rebuilding team. He's extremely valuable to a contender because he has multiple skills. He plays hard on defense. He's a really good passer at 6'8", 250. He moves decently well, so he can guard on the perimeter. And he figured out how to shoot his senior year at Missouri. And I think he's an adult in the room from day one because he's 23 and he's been through a lot of battles in the SEC. I don't think there's a higher character guy in this draft. And I'm excited to see him become a leader quickly in the NBA. So hell of a pick at 30 for the Clips. I had him at like 14.
Yeah. We talked about him a little bit before the draft. He's got some flashes of like baby Draymond to him where he can guard a bunch of different positions pretty comfortably. He's going to have to work on his conditioning and his body a little bit, but he's got a lot of skill for a guy his size. He moves well for a guy his size. And yeah, his senior year really seemed like he turned a corner with his jump shooting. So I think he's, going to have the potential to play some small ball 5 for the Clips. We know they love to throw out those kind of really small lineups. And yeah, great pick. That was probably going to be my next pick too. I'll go ahead and take Kobe Buffkin, who we talked about at the top of the show. He ended up going 15 to Atlanta. I had him at 8 on my board. Drew, you had him at 6, I believe. And we're not doing worst fits or worst value, but I think the fact that his teammate Jet Howard went 4 spots ahead of him is going to age horribly. Yeah. Jet Howard, someone I had at 29, and the fact that Orlando picked him at 11 over sort of 2 other very good shooting specialists kind of boggles my mind. But this is about Buffkin, and he's someone who I don't think has any real weaknesses to his game. He kind of rocketed up my board on the last day that I was updating it because I was watching Jet Howard tape, and I kept sort of being drawn back to Kobe Buffkin and seeing him sort of, hit a pull-up, hit a spot-up 3, play really good guard defense, just sort of flash his length and all these different things. And he really doesn't have any holes in his game. Like, there's nothing that he's super elite at except maybe on-ball defense I think he's really good at. But offensively, he's got a solid handle. He can pass pretty well. He can pull up. He can hit spot up threes. He can get to the basket. He was an elite finisher at the rim. And his team was a lot better when he was on the court too. Like all the on-off metrics support that they were wildly better when he was on the court.
I can't believe that a professional adult looked at that full Michigan season and took Jet, especially because Kobe would have been a great fit in Orlando. And
Yep.
I loved Anthony Black and Kobe. And if you get both of those guys in the top 11, in my mind, you won the draft. So good pick. Let's just hope Trae Young leaves enough space for him to grow because he's rapidly improving. He barely played as a freshman. He dominated as a sophomore, and he might be like an SGA type guy who's, still very much trending upward because he's a young sophomore. All right.
Yes.
I am going to go with number 10 pick, Cason Wallace, who's a member of the Thunder, even though Dallas had the pick. I just love the fit. I had Cason at number 7. I was way higher on him than you were. And there are very few better places for him to go. So I think getting him at number 10 is going to age very well. He is a really good spot up 3-point shooter. 80% of his threes were off the catch in college, which is great because they have SGA, they have Giddey, they have Jalen Williams. These guys who are really good with the ball, and he can spot up. He can slash. I told you his offensive profile to me is like almost more like a wing, like attack closeouts, shoot threes off the catch. You don't have to do too much. His main role will be like he'll be like a Davion Mitchell type of weapon for them on defense. And I love that they just continue to add versatile, competitive two-way guys. Future is bright for OKC, and Cason has the it factor. We talked about it with Jalen Hood-Schifino. Cason has it too. I'm sure of that.
Yeah. All right. My next pick, I'm going to take Taylor Hendricks, who the Jazz took at number 9. And I just think their sort of vision of building a front court defense around Taylor Hendricks and Walker Kessler is awesome. Kessler already showed he's one of the best rim protectors in the NBA as a rookie. And I think he finished 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting. He was also good at finishing. He's just someone who's going to have a really long career as a basket protector. And then you add Taylor Hendricks to that, who's this really long kind of 4. He can play some small ball 5 probably. He's a good shooter, good spot up shooter. He doesn't have much to his offensive game besides spot up threes, but his skill set of shooting and then kind of secondary rim protection, where he's a very good shot blocker and rim protector for his size. When teams are going up against sort of the length of Hendricks and Kessler at the rim, that's a real foundation that you can build an elite defense around. And some of the stuff the Jazz did later in the draft with drafting Keontae George, especially, and a little bit Bryce Sensabaugh as well, kind of confused me. But I guess they want to take upside swings on scorers. But the defensive vision with Hendricks and Kessler, I think, is awesome. And that could be like a little baby version of, the 2 big lineups that we see flourishing around the league, whether it's Horford and Robert Williams or Giannis and Brook Lopez, Jaren Jackson and Steven Adams, Mobley and Jared Allen, just sort of having those double rim protectors. That's going to be something the Jazz will have. And then you also add in his 3-point shooting. He's just someone who would be able to fit on almost any team in the NBA with his skill set. It's very highly coveted. So he may not end up rising that much in the draft, but I just think that's a great fit next to Walker Kessler.
For sure. I'm going to go with the 35th pick in the draft, who is a Chicago Bull, Julian Phillips of Tennessee. I had him at, I think, 21, 22. And getting him at 35 is a steal. I don't know what the hell the Bulls are going to look like. That's why I didn't pick him earlier in this draft, because it's hard for me to evaluate the fit. The Bulls are in flux. It feels like out of nowhere, the Bulls are the most talked about team in the podcast world the last week or two.
Yeah.
Which is funny because, like I said, the bulk of free agency is behind us and they have the same exact team, it feels like. But Julian Phillips is another guy who I think fits into a rebuild or a good team because he plays really good wing defense, and that will get him on the floor early with strict NBA coaches who aren't used to trusting rookies on that end. And anything you get from him offensively will be a bonus. I think his shooting will come in time because he doesn't have a broken stroke. and yeah, 6'8", incredibly bouncy, and I think a high character guy. So I think the defense will translate.
For sure.
Maybe a
All
Herb,
right.
maybe a Herb Jonesy guy for Chicago.
Yeah, he's got some of that to him for sure with his athletic profile. This next pick might be a little weird, but it's not someone we've talked about a ton. I just think the fact that the Warriors got him with the last pick of the draft is good value, and that's Trace Jackson Davis. To be fair, he was second to last of the 42 prospects that I evaluated, but I was, judging my evaluations based on the consensus top guys. So I would imagine most of the other guys left on the list would be below him. But I think the Warriors are a great fit for him. He's a little undersized as a center, and he's definitely a center. He's not someone who's going to be able to stretch out and play four. He's a center. He's only about 6'9", but I think he's pretty intelligent as a basketball player. He shows some good playmaking for his size. I think they'll be able to use him as a bench big, and he'll be able to contribute to the team sort of in the near term, which for the 58th pick in the draft is more than you can ask for. That pick generally has I looked it up actually. When I was seeing if we could come up with an algorithm for how to judge the different slots in the draft. The last pick in the draft has a 1% chance of being an all-star, which is actually higher than I expected. But yeah, I think he's going to add a little dimension to them of some athleticism, some vertical pop off the bench. He's a nice finisher around the basket on lobs and things like that. And yeah, if he can just give them a little bit of rim protection, playmaking from the big spot off the bench, and just sort of hustle and rebounding, I think that's a solid get for them at 58.
The hardest thing in the NBA world is pulling for a guy who gets drafted by the Hornets. But I had Amari Bailey in my top 20, and he got picked at 41 by Charlotte. So give me Amari Bailey.
All right.
Good defender, deceptively long, and high school sensation. He had a messy freshman year and still was reasonably efficient at UCLA in a tough situation where he was joining a team with a lot of established vets. But he's super talented, and I think he has a really good work ethic. Like, I watched him on Shumpert's podcast, and I just really like the way that he presents for a 19-year-old kid. He can get a little more confident with his right hand on offense. I think he can be a really, really effective slasher because his pull-up game is interesting. He's got great body control in the lane, and he's athletic. And if he can shoot threes and figure out his right hand offensively, he could be a really good two-way role player. So a rare Hornets pick that I have a lot of respect for.
All right. Yeah, I don't have a ton more guys that I really love the fit
Yeah.
for. One more guy that I'll say is Grady Dick, who Toronto got at 13. I had him at 10th on my board. He's one of the better shooters in the draft. I probably would have Hawkins as the best, but Dick probably is the second best. Where we won't talk about his draft night fit, but he is gonna, that's Toronto team is a team that really needs shooting, both them and the Magic. That's why I was so shocked the Magic took Jet Howard at 11 when they could have taken either Bufkin, who's more of an all-around guard, or someone like Grady Dick, who, if they just wanted a shooter, he was, right there for them and has the length that they like, being there at 6'7". And he's got more to him too. He's really competitive. He's got good height and length for his position. He's, a solid passer. He can finish around the basket decently. And I think we'll at least be able to hang on defense. He's not going to get absolutely torched. And he's got a very high floor as a player, but Toronto is a team that really needs shooting when you're building around Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Jakob Poeltl, all guys who, I guess it depends what Toronto does in their offseason from here, but all those guys sort of need some supporting shooting around them. So he should fit in really nicely for them. I think probably start from day one and give them a nice different element in their offense.
I'm a little bit, you mentioned Dick's finishing. Dick's finishing, Jesus Christ. I'm a little bit lower on Dick, like as outside of shooting. I don't think that he's going to be able to finish consistently in the NBA. I totally buy the shooting. He's one of the best shooters in the world, I think, today. And he is only a freshman out of college. But I think off the bounce, he's limited. So that's why I had him a little bit lower than where the Raptors took him. But the Raptors tend to turn guys into longtime NBA players. So any time a guy goes to Toronto, I feel like I'm going to like the fit. Okay, let me finish this off with just two guys. One of them is Anthony Black at number 6. I had him at 4. So obviously I like getting him at 6. I'm a little bit worried about the lack of shooting in Orlando because Anthony Black does everything well except shoot. But I just love Anthony Black, and I can't do any draft where I don't mention his name. Bouncy Derek White is just a hell of a player description, and I think he's got a lot of that. You mentioned Lonzo. He just has pieces of some of our favorite, like sort of brilliant big point guards. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see the way he fits into that incredibly talented young core in Orlando. I wish that the Blazers would trade Dame for some package of Jalen Suggs and Anthony Black, but Blazers fans would literally burn down the Moda Center if they did that because they're casuals. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And then the last guy I want to mention is number 12, Derek Lively, who I had at number 12. I just love that he's going to Dallas. Like Omax Prosper. This is just a guy who fits into the heliocentric Luka system very well. Luka has not had a rim protector of this ability yet. And I think his offense has more upside than he showed at Duke. But they picked him for the rim protection. They picked him for the lob finishing. And I think Luka's going to love having this bodyguard, this selfless, by all accounts, amazing kid who's going to come in there and be one of the most athletic bigs Luka's been able to play with so far in the league. So I love that fit. I love the run and jump athlete that they got for their stars.
Yeah. I was a little lower on Lively coming into the process, but I think Luka's going to get the best out of him.
Yeah.
And he's perfect for their system, just rolling hard to the basket and protecting the rim. So knowing where he ended up getting taken, I probably would have had him higher on my board than just sort of going to a general NBA team. But yeah, I think that's a great fit.
That's all for our fit draft. The Blazers do everything 3 years late, and we do draft recaps late. So we're not going to edit this one because I'm running to dinner. You're getting us no filter. Pray for Max's knee to heal. Pray for my heart to heal. Peace.